Hey gang, if you're watching, this is the second video of my son's ride-on Lamborghini Aventador. And the very first mod that I ever did on this was to lower it. Most people think, hey, I want to make it fast. That seems to be the very obvious one. I want to make these things faster, but when I first saw it, I'm not overly concerned about going fast. I think safety and maybe I'll work on that later. I want to look for a controlled way. But one thing I do like is aesthetics and looks. I thought about how do I do this, and same drill. I read on the internet how other people have done it. Most of them are hacks in that it requires massively modifying the car in a way that you can't reverse it. In the case of the rear, I've seen typically where they actually drill a new hole for the shaft to go through, and it just slams the car down really, I think, overly too low. A little excessive, a little too much. And in the front, I've seen where they chop a lot of the internal plastic, and they take the entire front end, the suspension and the steering, and they just kind of lift it all up. Again, a lot of the mods I've ever seen are not reversible. Maybe if you have the same car or something similar, you could just kind of take my trains of thoughts and work with it. It's a little bit more where you have to invest a little bit, because again, the idea was to make it so it's a clean modification, reversible, doesn't really hamper the actual performance of the car, and doesn't put my child in danger. So as a really quick point of reference, I always like to look at it where it's the center of the wheel to the top line of the fender, and you can see here this is about about 2 fingers here. You can see there's a lot of space. I've actually measured it from the bottom to the top here, and it measures about 240 millimeters. In the rear, you can see definitely there's a huge gap. There's 2 fingers, there's 3 fingers. So we'll say there's about 3 fingers. In the front is about 2 fingers. Again, I always like to base it kind of on the center of the wheel cap there, and I've measured that out at about 250. So 240 in the front, 250 in the back. It does have a raked kind of look. If you're dropping the front about, I think it's 17 millimeters if I'm correct. It's 17 millimeters in the back, 23 millimeters in the front. But it's an exact number, and I can explain. But it's a much cleaner drop. So what we'll do is we'll start with the rear side, because that's actually the easiest part of it. And then we got the car flipped upside down, and again, we're gonna start with the rear. So the good thing is the rear is very simple, and it's nothing more than this location here and here, and there's 2 springs under there. So it's a matter of just unscrewing these 4, unscrewing these 4. These plates come out and the whole thing flips over. As you can see, I got it unscrewed. So it's a matter of just removing these 2 plates, which I'll put away. And I'm gonna take this whole part here. This is the motor here, actually. It's the entire powertrain. And you can pretty much just lift it up. It's these 2 springs here, and you can pull them out. Now, as I had mentioned before, I've seen some interesting hacks with this. I've seen one where somebody just simply does this, and they literally just drop it back in. And they just fasten it, and they go, okay. And that drop gives you about 25-ish, maybe almost an inch drop, which is, I guess that's fine, but the problem is if I have the plate back on, it just kind of flops around. I don't think it's a clean install. My mod's a little bit of an investment, because I think more like an engineer. And so what did I do? I did some research, and I managed to find some other springs. This is the original one you can see here. And I got this spring. As an engineer, I have kind of access to different places where you can find certain material. You can probably do a search on eBay, Amazon, anything. But what I was trying to do is I was trying to look for a spring that's a little bit lower. I wanted to make sure, I did make sure that the compression rate and the load that it can handle is on the high side. I think this is don't quote me on it, I think it's like 60 or 70 pounds for each spring. So given that my son's only 33 pounds now and this thing maxes out at 66 pounds, I should be fine. You could maybe use the same spring. The problem is you can see that trying to squeeze this thing to get it lower is going to be, I mean, it's stiff. So I would highly suggest, and if you want to spend a little money, maybe find a lower spring. The good thing about my mod, it doesn't require drilling, any weird hacking. You just drop them in. Now, how do you know that you're going to get the nice ride height that I said? I know I just said earlier that I did 23 millimeters in the back, but I just checked. The actual answer is 24. How do I know it's 24? And I can show you right here. This is actually what dictates the height of the car. I actually have another version at 22, but I decided to go with 24 just to kind of bring the back down, make the car not so raked, as they term. So you can see it runs around 24 millimeters. And all I do is simply drop these in. You could see it actually bulges out, and that's the point. The springs are pushing up, this is gonna push down, and so the idea is I'm gonna push and attach the plate back on. And so you can see what's happening is now the car is being lowered by that 24 millimeters, but because I'm just not letting it flop around, it's actually gonna seat right. It's not just gonna be loosely flying. So I am now going to screw it down. That's it for the rear side. So as you can see, I finished screwing it down. The big thing you will notice, if you look previously in the video, the shaft used to sit right across here, and you can see how far down it is. Here's a screwdriver. You can see it's pushed down. So that's a clear indicator that that this car has definitely been lowered. So in order to work on the front suspension, fortunately the way they set this up, it's kind of got snaps for the hubcap. And I guess I should have mentioned that in my first video, that you attach the screws and then there is an assembly, you pop the hubcap off. But, this is where you can use the cool little tool, but I can tell you right now, I just prefer to use actual regular tools. It's 13 millimeter socket wrench or socket, depending on what you have. And so you remove that, there is a washer and it slips right off. And as you can see, what do we have for the suspension? It's pretty straightforward. You can see that they have a spring right here, a compression spring. It's attached up here with a nut. Right now, what I can tell you is, so there is this wire here, and that's why I wanted to do this side, because I wanted to show it. If you own the Kidszone Lamborghini or maybe another of their models, there is this wire that kind of comes around here. I can only assume it is the antenna for the parental control I had mentioned. I'm not 100% sure. I have not taken the rest of the car apart to determine that. In order to make this all work, you'll find that I'll move it up here, and I'll show that in a minute. One thing I can show here too, this is a side mod that I did in the process, is you can see that on the back side there is this washer, where on the shaft here, it's about a 10 millimeter shaft. It's actually closer to 9.7, 9.8 tolerancing, which kind of makes sense. There's the little ears here, and so the idea is that as you put the washer in, this kind of holds a certain location, to which then once you attach the wheel, it positions the wheel. So as you can see, I released the nut, and now it's kind of in a loose state. And so it takes a little bit of muscle, but if you see, you can just drop it out and that's it. So the first things first is I wanted to say, like, I wanted to look for a way to relocate this, and you'll see why. So I relocated simply up there. It does the job. Originally I thought to duct tape it, but I kind of figured out a way to make enough slack that I could just drop it on top. And so here is your spring. We'll take that out. And similar to the rear, again, I've seen others where they just completely hack out this in an attempt to raise this whole thing up, which obviously would drop the car down. Usually requires a lot of cutting this. I was looking for a clean mod, and similar to the rear, I did some shopping and I found another spring. Again, very stiff. These ones actually are more stiff than the rear ones. These are closer to like 80 or 90 pounds each. So again, my son at most will be 66 pounds when he outgrows this. So these should do very well. And I got a pair of them, and simply in this case, I'll drop it in and that's it. Now you go pop it in. Now I could leave it and I could let it be, but again, that'd be kind of a hacky thing, because what happens when you lift your car, it would keep doing this. How do I know that it's gonna be exactly 17 millimeters? Why? Because similar to the rear, I made a spacer. And this spacer, it's an unthreaded aluminum spacer. This dictates the height. So I could have made it 16, I could have made it 15, similar to the rear. I have it at 24 now. I originally had a 22 millimeter. That's the one cool thing about my mod, is that you can make it whatever height you want if you got the right tools and accessibility. I'm very lucky because I have access to a lathe, so I can lathe this part out. This is originally 20 millimeters. I got it down to 17. That part that you saw previously with the rear, it was nothing more than a piece of 1-inch aluminum rod, and then I basically just laid it out exactly where I wanted it, which is 24 millimeters in the rear, 17 millimeters here in the front. So what happens is I'm actually going to stick it on top, because that's where the part dictates the height. And this takes a little bit of muscle, but I'm gonna push just enough to get the threads going on that nut. I need like at least the first half to turn. And once I do that, that's it. Now comes the process of just tightening it. I just finished tightening it up, and that's the finished product. You can see now that the spring's already now in a compressed state. Again, this part dictates the 17 millimeter drop, and all that is left is to put it together. She created this spacer, and you can see I actually added the little openings to allow the ears that were kind of compressed out on the shaft so it slides through. And basically I just slide this on. Before I slide out of the way, the one thing I like is you can see it's a little bit more restrictive, and you can see that from a fit standpoint, it's basically on key. So it's, if you really look at it, it's so when the wheel pushes up against it, it's a nice, a little bit more reliable support, or a more reliable point of reference when it lies plain to it. Here's one other additional feature why I like this. Because it's a design part, I can decide what the thickness is. And where this comes into play, and I'll go ahead and show you now, is when I bring the wheel in this case, I kind of actually wanted the wheel to tuck in a little bit more. What I did is I have that spacer, it goes in, and I got this little shim, 10 millimeters on the inside, and it simply slips here. This is the covering wheel here. And then all I gotta do is just finish it off, put the hubcap on, and we got the very first wheel done. Want to make sure it spins nice and neat. That's another reason why I like my little spacer, is that you can see it gives a little bit of a nice cleaner spin. I wish I had shown it earlier, but if I use this, if you spin it fast enough, the wheel will actually start to resonate and go, and that's usually because there's too much slop. That's it, pop the hubcap out. I'm gonna work on the other side, and then we will see the final result. you know, you flip the car back over and everything's done. Hopefully, if you're able to remember or recall what it looked like before, hopefully you'll observe that it has definitely been dropped. My wife will be able to put in a quick snippet of what it looked like before, but again, as a quick metric, we can see here, originally it was like about 2 in the front. You could see I couldn't even get 2 fingers in there. I mean, I'm lucky to maybe get 1. And like I say, I know the exact number. It's a 17 millimeter drop. Let's look at the rear. I think we were up to like 3. And you can see, there's no way I can even get 3. I'd be lucky if I got 2. It's probably like 1.5. And I know the exact number. It is 24 millimeters. Hopefully you can see right out of the gates. This is definitely not a performance mod. This doesn't make your car any faster, make it, you know, any more in terms of speed and power, any cooler in that respect. But I would say from a look perspective, yeah, that definitely gets higher marks. Hope you enjoy this. Again, hopefully you can take some tidbits into how I modded it. If you have any questions, maybe leave a comment, maybe give a contact. We'll go from there. So until the next video, have a good one.